The COVID-19 pandemic has had an impact on the continuity of learning across all public and private sector educational institutions in Pakistan, which remained closed from mid-March to mid-September 2020 and closed again from November 2020 to January 2021 due to the second wave of the pandemic. School closures directly impacted 40 million school-going learners from pre-primary and primary to higher secondary levels. UNICEF supported the Idara-e-Talim-o-Agahi to undertake Measuring the Impact of COVID-19 on Learning pilot study to assess the effect of school closures and disruption of learning in 16 rural districts of Pakistan by measuring the learning losses incurred due to COVID-19 using the assessment tools developed by Asar Pakistan. With a staggering decline in the school enrollment rate, the pandemic has deprived an astounding number of children of the basic right to education by amplifying financial hardships and increasing the school dropout rate by 20%. This slide shows that 6% of surveyed children have dropped out of school, 5% before the COVID-19 period and 1% during the pandemic. In terms of percentage change during the COVID-19 period, dropouts increased by 20%. As you can see from this slide, the proportion of children who dropped out during the pandemic increases with level of education. 2020 can be termed as the year of learning losses. This study shows that school closures have led to a learning crisis for primary school children with a greater decline in learning for the lower primary grades from grade 1 to 3. For each subject, learning levels for 2021 were reviewed for children in school and for out-of-school children, followed by a deeper dive into learning at grade 3 and grade 5 levels. Trends in learning from 2019 and 2021 for children enrolled in primary grades have been presented in this slide to visualize the progress made prior to the pandemic and to highlight learning losses during the pandemic. The study reveals statistically significant learning losses at primary and lower primary level, while learning losses are far more severe for children in grade 3 than those in class 5. This slide and the following two slides present the grade 3 results from 2019 against the declining results in 2021. This study shows that school closures have led to a learning crisis for primary school children. Younger children who have not yet built a foundation for learning are more vulnerable to learning losses. Learning levels are highest in surveyed districts of Punjab, followed by KP and Sindh, and are lowest in Balochistan, whereas learning losses are highest in surveyed districts of Balochistan, followed by Punjab, Sindh and KP. The following two slides present provincial trends in learning in arithmetic and English. Girls experienced greater learning losses than boys during the COVID-19 school closures across nearly all competencies and classes. This served to halt or even reverse an existing trend in learning outcomes for girls who in some cases outdid boys. This is evident from the results shown on this slide. When girls are given an opportunity to learn, they are able to match and even outperform boys. However, if this right is taken away, factors such as the burdens of household chores and lower access to technology for learning can cause them to fall behind. Parental education, especially mothers' education, is a strong factor in children's education. It is clear from this slide that children with educated mothers yielded better learning outcomes. For reading, Urdu, arithmetic and English, the learning outcomes of children improve as the education levels of mothers improve. Parents belonging to wealthier households are generally more educated compared to parents in poorer households and able to provide support for learning at home, as is evident from the results displayed on this slide. Wealth also correlates to the availability of technology in households, which itself is important for distance learning during school closures. Poorer households have far lower access to technology than their wealthier counterparts. An assessment of learning outcomes by Wealth Index shows that learning outcomes for each subject improve with the Household Wealth Index. This slide represents a declining trend in enrollment in private schools and an increase in enrollment in free government schools to reduce household expenditure. COVID-19 placed an additional financial burden on vulnerable households due to loss of income of daily wages or those running small businesses. In 2019, the USSR study found that 10% of the surveyed households were recipients of support from social safety nets. In 2021, the percentage of households benefiting from these forms of support has risen to 11%. Despite the closures, schools were expected to continue to provide learning support to children. The study found that 60% children spent less than an hour studying every day during school closures. A huge number of children reported that schools did not provide any form of learning support during periods of school closure. 32% children reported taking learning support from the government's dedicated channel Teleschool and Talim Ghar in Punjab, while 40% children used smartphones, with younger children receiving less time to access these than the older children. However, the pandemic has worsened the condition of toilets and safe drinking water in all schools, raising concerns about their safe reopening. Fewer government schools have functional computer laboratories in 2021 than they did in 2019, whereas private schools have seen an increase in computer labs in 2021. The lack of strict enforcement of COVID-19 SOPs in schools, particularly government institutions, demands urgent attention from government and decision makers. Pakistan's crisis of learning is rooted in a deeper crisis of equity. Girls, as well as children from lower wealth backgrounds and certain geographical regions, suffer the greatest learning losses in Pakistan. Based on the findings of this study, it is recommended that policies and programs must be devised to support the learning of all children with a focus on young children and girls. The factors that lead to education inequities must be tackled, such as social protection programs for girls' education and targeted support for children in the poorest households using low-tech and no-tech modalities.